In his most recent remarks about tariffs, U.S. President Donald Trump has suggested a 25% tariff on auto imports into the American market and another 25% tariff on semiconductor shipments into his country. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Press Perspective. It's Wednesday, February 19th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. Addressing members of the media in Florida on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump floated the idea of a 25% tariff on all foreign-made cars and chips entering the American market. For more on his remarks and their ripple effects, I have Lee Ji-hoon with Reuters here in the studio. Ji-hoon, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Professor Jaemin of International Trade Law at Seoul National University live on the line. Professor Lee, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. It's great to be on the show. Thank you.
Right. We'll start here in the studio, Ji-hoon. Let's delve into Mr. Trump's latest remarks on trade in chronological order, though. So late last week, he put on his social media platform a lengthy post in support of his reciprocal tariff proposal and in defiance of the so-called value-added tax. Let's start with that post.
Yep. Last Thursday, U.S. President Donald Trump announced that the administration will prepare reciprocal tariffs that are equivalent to measures taken by its trading partners on the United States. He said it will be whatever other countries charge the United States, no more, no less. He said the tariffs will be calculated for every country and one by one, and that they will also take into account non-tariff barriers such as taxes, subsidies, regulations, and foreign exchange policies. Trump specifically mentioned value-added taxes, which is not in the United States, but that means basically every other country will be under scrutiny because value-added taxes are imposed in every OECD country, including South Korea, where the tax rate stands at 10%, and most other countries around the world. After Trump's announcement, economists say it could take weeks or even months to complete the task because it includes a lot of factors and a lot of countries. Nomura, for example, said non-tariff barriers will be hard to quantify, so it will make his decision a little bit less transparent, and that there is a possibility of negotiations between the U.S. and trading partners. ING also said it will be almost impossible for Asian countries to avoid tariffs, and it also might spark a legal backlash, which means there is a possibility of trading negotiations because Trump himself sees as a deal maker. The USA will first look into countries of high trade surpluses, including South Korea and other Asian manufacturing-based economies. And the measures will be ready by April 1st.
Right. And before we dig deeper into that, Professor E., what exactly are value-added taxes, and how do you respond to Mr. Trump's intentions to consider them tariffs?
Thank you. This is the latest development of a parade of tariffs we have been hearing for the past several weeks. VAT is a special tax which is imposed on consumption at every stage of production or distribution. As Mr. Lee Ji-hoon just mentioned, VAT is one of the common taxation system adopted by 170 plus countries all over the world. And VAT or any internal taxation system has been beyond the reach of trade agreements or investment agreements. So the latest development or announcement by President Trump on VAT and treating VAT as something similar to tariffs is a very novel and surprising attempt in the discussion of tariff. And this actually opens up the Pandora's box. Now, the tariffs are imposed on the border, at the border, between country A and country B at the border. Tariffs are imposed for imported products. But now, if you talk about VAT or if you talk about the taxation system, you actually go deeper into the territory of another country. You go beyond the borderline. So you are actually touching upon the sovereignty of another state. So that's why the latest discussion of VAT is rather different from the tariff discussion we have been hearing so far.
I see, which is why some pundits are claiming that it may spark a trade war then. And before we delve into that then, simply speaking, Ji-hoon, which countries look to be greatly affected by Mr. Trump's reciprocal tariff plan? And do tell us a bit about the import tariff gaps, perhaps, between the U.S. and its Asian trading partners, including, of course, South Korea.
Yep. As I mentioned earlier, U.S. will first look into countries of high trade surpluses and high tariffs, and it specifically mentioned China, Japan, South Korea, and the European Union. Among major countries, China's trade surplus is the highest, accounting for more than 1/3 of U.S. trade deficit, and that is followed by Mexico, Vietnam, and Germany, while Japan ranks the 5th and South Korea ranks the 8th. Among those countries, China has already introduced countermeasures after U.S. Introduced 10% tariffs on all imports from China earlier this month. And last week, Europe also reacted to Trump's announcement by saying it will prepare strong and immediate countermeasures. The EU claims that criticizes the U.S. plans as unjustified and a wrong direction because the EU's tariffs are among the lowest, and about 70% of its imports are already duty-free. Meanwhile, Japan also said it is already in talks with the United States over the tariffs and that it will respond appropriately after analyzing the impact. Meanwhile, now regarding tariffs, India's tariffs are the highest among the top 15 U.S. trading partners, with its rate at about 17% on simple average compared with the 3.3% in the United States. So that's why India's Prime Minister met with Trump last week and said as the country will buy more gas, oil, and military equipment from the United States after recently lowering tariffs on U.S. imports and increasing market access to U.S. farm products. After India, South Korea's global tariff rate is the second highest at 13.4%. But when it comes to South Korea, it is among a few Asian countries that has a free trade agreement with the United States, which eliminate nearly all tariffs to 0%. Still, South Korea is among potential targets because South Korea's trade surplus is widening. Last year, it rose 25% to $55.7 billion, which was a record high. Interestingly, however, in the stock market, the Kospi today rose for the 7th straight session and hit the highest level since late September because analysts and investors are hoping or expecting that the impact of tariffs might not be as severe as previously anticipated.
I see. Well, fingers crossed for that then. Professor Yi, does South Korea's free trade agreement that Ji-hoon just mentioned, does it essentially shield it from Trump tariffs, do you think?
To some extent, yes. But now, because of the latest development, I doubt it. Because the Korea-US FTA provides the zero tariffs for almost all products. It's about 98% of trading items between the United States and Korea are exported and imported without tariffs. So in that regard, when it comes to reciprocal tariffs, Korea is being shielded because already many items are coded the zero tariffs. But at the same time, President Trump and his staff have mentioned the possibility of considering non-tariff trade barriers. or exchange rates. Or, as we discussed before, VATs or taxation system, or other types of import-export related measures. So that means that it is not just confined to the tariff rate issue, but also it can also consider a wide range of domestic measures, starting from taxation to regulatory measures to digital-related measures, all those issues. So that makes Korea in a difficult position as well. So Korea-US FTA is a good starting point. It provides us a good shield at this time of Korea-US discussion, but at the same time, it does not necessarily protect Korea when it comes to all those new issues, all those new items, new issues that are being raised at the moment. So we'll have to see.
Right, and speaking about new issues, just yesterday, Ji-hoon, as I mentioned at the start of our talk, President Trump spoke about the possibility of a 25% tariff on all foreign-made cars entering the U.S. market. How does that look to affect Korea's auto exports?
Yep. Last week, Trump said he will introduce tariffs on auto imports from April 2nd. And yesterday, he said the tariffs will be at a rate of around 25%. It comes after his earlier announcement this month that the U.S. will impose 25% tariffs on steel imports, which raised worries about South Korean steel makers such as POSCO and Hyundai Steel. It also comes after Trump's earlier tariffs on imports from Mexico, though it's postponed for now. But that also had raised worries about South Korean automakers because Kia has a factory in Mexico. Analysts say the new tariffs on auto imports are mostly targeting the European Union because the EU's tariffs on vehicles is at 10% compared with 2.5% in the United States. Between South Korea and the United States, currently there is no tariff on auto exports and imports. But analysts say new tariffs on imports will still be a major issue for South Korea, because auto was the main driver of South Korea's exports last year, and South Korea is deeply integrated into global supply chains. South Korea is one of major auto exporters to the United States, along with Mexico, Canada, and Japan. And last year, nearly 50% of South Korea's auto exports were shipped to the United States. Last year, when South Korea's exports hit a record high, it was led by auto exports, and because it accounted for 27% of total exports to the United States. And that was much higher than 8% for semiconductors, while the shipments of auto parts was also a significant share of South Korea's exports to the United States. According to Barclays, an investment bank, it says South Korea stands out among emerging Asian economies when it comes to exposure to the auto tariffs because of its position in the global supply chain in the auto industry. And another investment bank, Citi, said the 25% tariffs on automobiles, as well as semiconductors and medicine, they are estimated to have a negative impact of 0.2% of South Korea's GDP altogether.
I see. And talking about South Korea semiconductors, Professor, what fate does the chip industry here in Korea look to face in the wake of Mr. Trump's tariffs?
Well, the 25% tariff rates for semiconductors is really high. In the area of semiconductor market, 2 to 4% tariff rate makes a significant impact on the market in the competitive dynamics. For now, we are talking about 25% of tariffs on semiconductors, which means a lot of impact on the semiconductor market generally and on the Korean exporters particularly. So the imposition, the the possible imposition of 25% tariffs on semiconductors from Korea is a significant game changer, which is why the government and companies are so concerned about the possibility at the moment. We'll have to see how things evolve in the month of March, because the mentioned imposition of tariff on semiconductors is going to be imposed as of April 2nd. So we have to wait. And also, this tariff imposition is in addition to other issues, which includes the continuation of the subsidies from the U.S. government, according to the Chips and Science Act, provided to the Korean semiconductor companies whose factories are located in the United States. And also, there are many layers of export and R&D activities regulation imposed by the U.S. government, mainly in the context of U.S.-China semiconductor competition. So the Korean companies are now facing threefold of difficulties. On the one hand, they have to deal with tariffs. On the other hand, they have to deal with the continuation of the possible continuation of subsidy programs from the United States, and also the ongoing and possibly expanding the web of regulation imposed by the U.S. government. So it's a very difficult situation for the Korean companies at the moment.
Right, and against the backdrop of such difficulties, Ji-hoon, President Choi Sang-mok, he's called for a review of non-tariff barriers. You covered this particular call. Could you share details of your coverage with us, including, of course, the relevance of this move?
Yeah, it was just hours after Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs. South Korea's acting president Choi Sang-mok said the government will review non-tariff barriers to respond to Trump's tariff plan. He said the impact of reciprocal tariffs might not be huge on the economy because of the Free Trade Act, but then he said it was still important to monitor because Trump, of course, also mentioned non-tariff barriers, especially value-added taxes and taxes on digital services. Acting President Choi also said the government will identify key areas of U.S. interest and prepare to explain to the Trump administration about South Korea's non-tariff barriers. At an administrative level, officials say there is not much hindering trade of goods between South Korea and the United States. And in some cases, U.S. exports to South Korea are favored under the free trade agreement. However, they say they are looking into everything because, of course, Trump administration mentioned a lot of different areas such as foreign exchange and regulations. Nomura, Japanese investment bank, said South Korea's non-trade barriers could include technical barriers for chemicals and packaging materials, as well as regulations delaying product launches of automobiles and medicine. And in terms of foreign exchange, South Korea's won weakened more than 20% against the dollar last year due to domestic political uncertainty. And that could be one area because weak currency is often seen to benefit exporters. Among other steps, the government said it is sending delegations to the United States and raising financial support for exporting companies. This week, representatives from 20 South Korean companies are visiting the U.S. to meet with policymakers. And according to the government, the industry minister as well as trade minister plan to visit the United States in the near future. The government has also announced a record high of 60 trillion won worth of financing support for exporting companies, as well as subsidies for companies planning to relocate their operations due to tariffs, and vouchers for companies that might be hit by tariffs.
Right, indeed. Right, Professor, as Ji-hoon just mentioned, we have delegations both from the government as well as from the corporate sector seeking talks with relevant U.S. authorities. Now, pundits claim, Professor E, that one-on-one negotiations with the Trump administration will allow for some exemptions from tariffs. Do you share this view? And if that is the case, Professor E, how can Korea better navigate these bilateral talks on trade?
Well, yes, I fully agree. I think it's very, very crucial that Korea is engaged in the direct negotiation with the Trump administration as soon as possible. I think the government is being engaged with talks already, but I think the more important discussions will take place in the month of March, because now they are discussing the imposition of tariffs or imposition of other regulation as of April 1st, April 2nd. So the window of opportunity is closing very fast. We just have about a month, and it's a very crucial month for Korea and for Korean companies. So we have to do our best to have meaningful discussion with the United States. So these discussions include discussions at the top level, but also at the working level, and also at the ministerial level. So we need to be engaged in discussions at every different level between the two governments. So hopefully, in the month of March, we can register some meaningful outcome from the discussion. I think there's a possibility that we can seek and we can secure some sort of exemption, not exactly the entire probably not in the area of full exemption or some wide exemption, but at least we can secure some sort of exemption for Korean companies and for Korean products. But to do that, we need to provide some rationale. We need to come up with some ideas, some package deal ideas, and some rationale for the U.S. government to consider. That is the job for the Korean government, and that is something that needs to be brought to the table of negotiation between Korea and the United States in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Professor Lee, then on that cautious note of optimism, we will end today's talk. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Lee.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Min.
Right. And here in the studio, Ji-hoon, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you very much.
Right. Well, on that note, we end this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching, and do join us again same time tomorrow for the latest on President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial.